Many people think gardening can't get you in trouble, but that's not always true. Most people assume that simply growing plants cannot lead to legal consequences. After all, how risky can a flower or shrub really be? However, in some cases, plants grown behind fences and decorative beds, or even found in the wild, can result in serious legal problems. Laws differ from country to country and even between regions, but one fact remains clear: not knowing the law does not exempt you from it. Some plants were once considered medicinal or ornamental. Others are invasive species or tightly regulated substances. In certain situations, a plant growing in a backyard could already be a violation. Here are two examples often associated with strict legal control. 1. Opium poppy. At first sight, the opium poppy looks delicate and harmless. Its thin, elegant petals appear in shades of white, pink, purple, or red, giving it an ornamental appeal that many gardeners appreciate. Because of its beauty, it is sometimes planted without full awareness of its legal implications. The species Papaver somniferum is the botanical source of opium, the raw material used to produce morphine, codeine, and heroin. The plant's milky sap contains naturally occurring compounds that have played a major role in medical history, international conflicts, and the development of drug regulations worldwide. The key issue in many regions is that legal consequences may depend solely on the plant's presence. In numerous countries, cultivating opium poppy plants can be prohibited, regardless of whether the grower intends to harvest or process them. Even a small number of plants may be enough to trigger legal action, including fines or confiscation. What surprises many people is that poppy seeds used in baking are often legally available. These seeds are commonly sold for culinary purposes or as part of ornamental seed mixes. However, once planted and grown into mature plants, the legal status may change significantly. Authorities may classify a blooming poppy garden as a potential source of controlled substances rather than a decorative display. In some jurisdictions, possession of live opium poppy plants can be treated similarly to possession of illegal drugs. This may result in plant removal, investigation, or even prosecution in severe cases, regardless of the gardener's intentions. Historically, the opium poppy has had a complex reputation. It was used in ancient medicine as a pain reliever and sleep aid. Over time, it also became associated with addiction and misuse, leading governments to implement strict regulations. Because of this dual history, medicinal value and high risk, many countries enforce strict policies. The paradox is striking. A flower admired for beauty and symbolism can, under certain laws, become a serious legal concern. 2. Coca plant. The coca plant appears unassuming. It is a small green shrub with simple leaves and subtle flowers, lacking any obvious dramatic features. Despite its modest appearance, it is among the most tightly regulated plants globally. The species Erythroxylum coca is the natural botanical source from which cocaine is derived. Due to this connection, its cultivation is restricted or prohibited in many countries outside specific regions of South America. International agreements classify coca as a controlled plant because of its potential to be processed into illegal substances. For centuries, indigenous communities in the Andes have used coca leaves traditionally and respectfully. The leaves are chewed or brewed into tea to support energy, reduce fatigue, aid digestion, and help adapt to high-altitude conditions. In those cultural settings, coca holds historical and symbolic importance. However, outside those contexts, regulations change significantly. In many parts of the world, growing a coca plant, even as a curiosity or educational specimen, can be illegal. Importing seeds or attempting to cultivate the plant may result in customs seizure or legal investigation. Authorities typically do not differentiate between decorative or research purposes when it comes to controlled species. The primary concern is the plant's potential to be used in the production of illegal drugs. Because coca plants grow slowly and may seem harmless in appearance, some individuals underestimate the seriousness of the regulations. Legally, even a single plant can be considered a violation in certain jurisdictions. The coca plant represents a broader tension between traditional cultural use and modern drug control laws. In one region, it may symbolize heritage and survival. In another, it may be classified strictly as contraband. This difference in legal interpretation is what makes coca one of the most heavily regulated plants, not because of how it looks, but because of its legal classification and potential uses. 3. Peyote peyote is one of the smallest plants mentioned here, yet its legal significance is substantial. Visually, it appears modest, a low-growing, rounded, spineless cactus that often blends seamlessly into desert terrain. Because of its compact size and simple appearance, it is sometimes mistaken for an ordinary decorative succulent. Unfortunately, that misunderstanding has led to serious consequences for some individuals. Peyote contains mescaline, a naturally occurring psychoactive compound. For thousands of years, it has been used in ceremonial contexts by certain Native American communities, where it holds deep spiritual meaning. Within these traditions, peyote is regarded as a sacred plant. In recognition of this cultural importance, very limited legal protections or exemptions exist in specific regions, typically restricted to recognized indigenous groups and governed by strict regulations. Outside of those narrowly defined exceptions, peyote cultivation, possession, sale, or purchase is prohibited in many countries and areas. Legal responsibility does not depend on consumption or intent. In several jurisdictions, simply owning a live peyote cactus can be interpreted as possession of a controlled substance. This creates particular risk for plant collectors. Peyote occasionally appears in online marketplaces, specialty cactus collections, or private sales, where buyers may assume it is just another rare ornamental species. However, enforcement authorities often treat it differently. There have been documented cases where individuals faced fines or charges for possessing even a single plant. Another factor increasing legal sensitivity is its extremely slow growth rate. In natural conditions, peyote can take decades to reach maturity. Due to habitat loss and overharvesting, it is considered vulnerable or endangered in various regions. As a result, unauthorized cultivation may involve not only drug-related laws but also environmental protection regulations. From a legal standpoint, peyote can trigger multiple concerns simultaneously: regulated substance classification, conservation status, and cultural sensitivity. This combination leaves very limited flexibility in most legal systems. A small cactus that fits in the palm of a hand can still carry significant legal consequences depending on where it is grown. 4. Tobacco represents one of the most complex legal examples among cultivated plants. It is widely available in processed commercial forms and is legally sold in many countries. However, growing tobacco personally can be restricted or regulated in certain regions. At first glance, tobacco resembles an ordinary garden plant. It produces broad green leaves and attractive tubular flowers that may appear decorative. Because of this appearance, beginners sometimes assume it can be grown freely as an ornamental species, yet its legal status differs significantly from its visual impression. The primary reason for regulation is taxation and agricultural control. Tobacco products are among the most heavily taxed goods globally. When individuals grow tobacco independently, they may bypass licensing systems, excise duties, and regulatory oversight. In several jurisdictions, unlicensed cultivation is considered unauthorized agricultural production, even if the plants are intended solely for personal use. Some regions allow limited home cultivation under strict conditions, such as registration, inspection, or compliance with processing rules. However, drying, curing, or preparing tobacco without proper authorization can escalate legal consequences. In certain documented cases, individuals have faced penalties, confiscation of plants, or legal proceedings related to improper cultivation. Historically, tobacco held ceremonial significance among indigenous peoples of the Americas, long before it became a global commercial product. Its rapid international spread was driven by economic demand and state-level interest in taxation and trade. Over time, governments recognized its financial value and established regulatory systems to control production and distribution. Today, tobacco is treated less like a typical plant and more like a regulated commodity. While purchasing tobacco products is legal in many places, cultivating the same plant independently may fall under agricultural, tax, or licensing laws depending on local regulations. Another factor contributing to regulation is nicotine content. Nicotine is a potent natural compound. Handling large quantities of fresh leaves without protective measures can, in some cases, lead to absorption-related health effects. For this reason, safety considerations may influence cultivation guidelines in certain areas. Additionally, tobacco cultivation can be resource intensive. It may require significant soil nutrients, careful curing processes, and responsible waste management. In regions with strict environmental regulations, these factors can further influence legal oversight. Overall, tobacco occupies a unique legal position. It is socially normalized and commercially widespread in processed form, yet its cultivation by private individuals may be restricted. This illustrates how legal frameworks often focus not solely on risk, but also on regulation, taxation, and control. As a result, tobacco can transform what seems like an ordinary garden crop into a potential regulatory issue, depending entirely on local law. 5. Jimson weed, Datura. Jimson weed, commonly known as Datura, devil's trumpet, or thorn apple, is one of the most hazardous plants both biologically and legally. Unlike many plants that conceal their risks behind attractive flowers, Datura contains toxicity throughout its entire structure. Leaves, seeds, flowers, and roots are all poisonous. The plant produces potent tropane alkaloids, compounds that can cause severe confusion, hallucinations, memory impairment, and loss of coordination. Unlike some other psychoactive substances, Datura does not typically produce controlled or predictable effects. Instead, it can distort perception in a way that feels completely real to the individual experiencing it. This can lead to dangerous behavior, accidents, or life-threatening situations. Because of its effects, Datura has a long and troubling history. It has been associated with poisonings, unsafe ritual practices, and experimental misuse. Emergency medical services worldwide continue to treat cases of Datura intoxication, sometimes with serious or fatal outcomes. From a legal perspective, Datura often exists in a complicated category. In some areas, it grows naturally and is not specifically prohibited. However, deliberate cultivation can raise legal concerns, particularly if the plant is accessible to children, pets, or the general public. In certain jurisdictions, authorities may classify growing Datura as a public safety issue rather than strictly a drug-related offense. This allows enforcement actions such as removal, fines, or penalties based on risk to the community rather than proof of intent. Simply having it planted in an uncontrolled environment can be sufficient for intervention. Another concern is how easily it spreads. A single Datura plant can produce a large number of seeds, many of which remain viable in soil for extended periods. Because of this, it can appear unexpectedly in gardens, sometimes without the owner realizing what it is until it becomes a concern. Unlike some toxic plants that have small safe thresholds, Datura has no reliable safe dosage. The difference between harmful and fatal exposure can be extremely narrow. This high risk has led to it being treated as a warning plant in many regions, even where it is not explicitly banned. Jimson weed is not considered a casual ornamental species. In areas where regulations apply, cultivating it can be viewed as introducing a serious public hazard. 6. Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed is often described as one of the most problematic invasive plants in regions where it has been introduced. In many cases, it does not need to be intentionally planted to create legal or financial complications. Simply owning property where it grows can lead to responsibility. At first appearance, Japanese knotweed may seem harmless. It has tall, bamboo-like stems and broad, heart-shaped leaves. Some people mistake it for a decorative garden plant. However, its growth behavior is extremely aggressive. Its underground root system, known as rhizomes, can extend deeply and widely. These roots are capable of damaging infrastructure such as foundations, walls, pavement, drainage systems, and pipes. In severe cases, knotweed infestations have contributed to structural damage and reduced property value, sometimes affecting insurance coverage in real estate transactions. Because of these risks, many countries treat Japanese knotweed under strict regulations. In places such as the United Kingdom and parts of Europe, it is illegal to intentionally plant, sell, transport, or allow the spread of this species. Property owners are often legally required to manage and control it. Failure to address an infestation can result in fines, legal claims, or other enforcement measures. Importantly, legal responsibility does not always depend on intent. If knotweed spreads from one property to another, disputes may arise between neighbors. During property sales, its presence can delay or even prevent transactions. In some cases, mortgage approval may be affected if the plant is detected. Improper disposal is also regulated. Cutting and discarding knotweed and general green waste can be prohibited, since even small fragments of root or stem can regenerate and cause new growth. Unlike ordinary weeds that can be easily removed, Japanese knotweed often requires structured management and ongoing monitoring. Once established, it can become a long-term issue rather than a simple gardening task. For this reason, it is widely recognized as a serious invasive species, and in many regions, its control is not optional but legally required. 7. Giant hogweed. Giant hogweed resembles a plant from a fantasy story. Extremely tall, with large umbrella-shaped clusters of white flowers rising above surrounding vegetation. Because of its size and appearance, some people confuse it with harmless wild plants or decorative species. However, contact with it can cause serious harm. The plant's sap contains chemicals that become highly reactive when exposed to sunlight. If the sap touches skin and is then exposed to ultraviolet light, it can trigger severe skin reactions, including painful burns, blistering, long-lasting scars, and, if it reaches the eyes, potential vision damage. The reaction is not always immediate, which can make the danger even more unexpected. Children and pets are particularly at risk because they may come into contact with the plant during outdoor play. For this reason, giant hogweed is considered a significant public health concern in many countries. Due to its ability to spread rapidly and outcompete native vegetation, it is often classified as an invasive species under strict regulation. In many regions, planting it is prohibited. Allowing it to spread can also be illegal, and property owners may be required to remove it once it is identified. Failure to take action can lead to penalties. In some cases, individuals have faced fines or legal consequences for not addressing infestations promptly. Authorities may require control measures to prevent further spread, especially in areas near schools, parks, walking paths, or residential zones. One of the challenges with giant hogweed is identification. Many people do not realize the plant is present until a harmful exposure occurs. Once confirmed, lack of awareness is generally not accepted as a defense under environmental regulations. Removal is also complicated. Direct contact without protective equipment can result in injury. In many areas, burning is prohibited due to environmental risks. Professional handling and disposal are often recommended, which can involve significant effort and expense. In several jurisdictions, reporting the presence of giant hogweed is encouraged or required, particularly in public areas. When found near places where people gather, response efforts may be prioritized. This plant interacts with sunlight in a way that creates serious risk, and legal frameworks often reflect that hazard. Giant hogweed is not just considered invasive. It is widely treated as a plant that can pose real danger to public health. 8. Kratom kratom is frequently described as one of the most legally uncertain plants in modern regulation, and that uncertainty contributes to its risk for cultivators. Native to Southeast Asia, kratom is a tropical tree whose leaves have traditionally been used in local communities for generations. Historically, laborers chewed the leaves for stimulation during long workdays, while in other contexts it has been used in varying preparations. The plant can produce different effects depending on dosage and preparation, which has led to ongoing debate in many countries. In small amounts, kratom leaves may produce stimulating effects. In larger amounts, they can create more sedative or calming responses. Because of this range, legal classifications differ widely between regions. In some countries and certain states, kratom is completely prohibited, making possession, sale, or cultivation illegal. In other areas, possession may be permitted, while cultivation is restricted. Regulations can change over time, meaning a plant grown legally at one point may later become restricted under updated laws. This shifting legal status has created complications for some growers, particularly where regulations changed after the plant had already been established. In such situations, compliance depends on local legislation at the time of enforcement. Kratom trees are not fast-growing herbs. They require time to mature. This means that legal environments can evolve during the plant's growth period. As a result, growers may face regulatory consequences if local laws are amended. Another factor is visibility. A mature kratom tree can be large and noticeable, making it difficult to conceal. In certain regions, possession of seeds or plants can attract scrutiny, especially where restrictions apply. Importantly, personal intentions do not necessarily alter legal classification. In regulated areas, medical use, traditional use, or lack of awareness may not exempt someone from compliance requirements. Kratom sits at the center of ongoing discussions about plant regulation, public health policy, and drug control frameworks. Because laws differ significantly across jurisdictions and can change over time, cultivating it may involve legal uncertainty. In regions where it is restricted, growing kratom can depend entirely on current legislation, and that makes staying informed essential before considering cultivation. 9. Water hyacinth. Water hyacinth is often considered one of the most misleadingly risky plants on this list. At first glance, it appears harmless and even attractive. Its broad green leaves float calmly on the water's surface, and its soft purple flowers make it look like an ideal addition to a decorative pond. Because of this appearance, many people purchase it without understanding its environmental impact. However, water hyacinth is an extremely aggressive aquatic plant. Under favorable conditions, it can reproduce rapidly, with populations expanding dramatically in a short period of time. In some environments, it spreads so quickly that it covers entire bodies of water. When this happens, sunlight is blocked from reaching underwater plants, oxygen levels can decline, and fish and other aquatic life may suffer. Native species are often displaced as well. Due to these ecological risks, many countries regulate water hyacinth very strictly. In numerous regions, selling, transporting, or intentionally cultivating it is prohibited. In some areas, even possessing the plant can result in penalties, regardless of intent. The focus of the law is usually prevention of spread rather than punishment of motive. Problems frequently begin unintentionally. For example, a pond plant may overflow during heavy rainfall, or small fragments may enter drainage systems and reach natural waterways. Once established in the wild, water hyacinth can be extremely difficult to control. Authorities may trace infestations back to their origin, and property owners can face fines or other consequences. Although it does not harm humans directly through toxins or physical injury, its environmental impact can be severe. Its ability to spread quietly and rapidly makes it a significant concern for ecosystems and water management systems. Water hyacinth demonstrates how a plant can become legally restricted, not because of direct toxicity, but because of its powerful effect on natural habitats. 10. Henbane. Henbane is a plant with a long and complex history, which continues to influence how it is regulated today. Known historically in ancient medicine and various traditional practices, henbane contains potent natural compounds including hyoscyamine and scopolamine. These substances can strongly affect the nervous system. Exposure can lead to confusion, hallucinations, memory disturbances, paralysis, and in severe cases, life-threatening complications. Effects can occur at relatively low amounts, depending on individual sensitivity. Unlike some plants that became problematic accidentally, henbane was historically cultivated with intention. It was used in medicinal contexts in the past, but also misused in harmful preparations. This dual history has shaped its modern reputation. Because of its association with psychoactive and toxic properties, henbane is regulated in many regions. In certain areas, growing it without authorization may be treated similarly to cultivating controlled substances. Even possessing seeds can attract attention, depending on local regulations. Mature plants in private gardens may also be subject to inspection or removal. Legal authorities often approach henbane cautiously due to its historical use in poisons and traditional mixtures. This background has contributed to its classification as a restricted plant in several jurisdictions. Even when grown for educational, botanical, or historical purposes, henbane may require compliance with specific rules. Some botanical institutions must follow strict guidelines when displaying it. Despite its historical significance, henbane's reputation remains tied to its toxic and psychoactive properties. Because of that legacy, it continues to be regulated in many places. Henbane may not appear threatening at first glance, but its long history of powerful effects has ensured that it remains under legal oversight in various regions.